Okay, here we go. As promised, we're back to cut this BT-60 tubing. And if we look real close here, we can see where we made our mark. And I think you can see most of this. I'll point it out and go through it. I've got just a simple chop saw, finish saw, whatever you'd like to call it, set up here to cut fiberglass. I have made a special purpose jig to hold the tubing. I've got an end stop here. In this case, I've got a couple of blocks to raise the tubing up, since this is a small piece of tubing. If you're dealing with 4-inch, 5, maybe even 6-inch, you obviously need to take out this block. And then I've sort of got, this is not really an end stop down here, but it holds the tube in place primarily to keep it from falling off. But it also helps control the turning of the tube, which you're going to see illustrated here in the video. The first thing I obviously have to do is adjust my stop block. We're going to be, the section that we're going to keep is going to stay here, so our pencil mark is going to be on the inside of the blade. And of course you need to follow any instructions for operating this, any safety instructions. We're talking about glasses. In the case of fiberglass, we're talking about a mask. I'll put those on here in just a moment, but certainly want to take a moment to remind folks. Right now it's unplugged, okay, while I work with it for obvious reasons. We will have to raise this guide a little bit during the cut to see it, so we'll do that with a thumb. Probably can't see that until we start cutting. So we'll stop it here, and I'll come back and start lining things up. Okay, now we're back here. You can see how I've laid the tubing down with this piece, and then I'm simply going to line up the blade on the cut, and you should be able to see the inside of the blade is going to trim that, is going to come across the center of that pencil mark. And yes, I did say the center of the pencil mark itself. If you're careful about this, maybe even do some test cuts on some scrap. You can get things down to 50th for sure, sometimes maybe even 100th of an inch if you're very careful about this. And you'll see that when we cut this in such a way that you can't tell. It won't be out 90 degrees. It'll be dead on 90 degrees, and you won't see where it stopped cutting. So I'm going to raise this back up and sort of use a thumb to hold this in place, and then move our end stop down here up. Whoop, and I moved it just a touch. You see, just a touch I moved it. We'll move it back. Don't have to be particularly accurate on this cut. Move it back, and then we'll come over here. We'll adjust our end stop very carefully so it's up against the tubing, and then I'm just going to take a simple clamp here, squeeze clamp, whatever you'd like to call it, and fix this block. So now what you'll see here is this tube actually rotates inside the groove here. And this is very important, because when you use an end block like this, it really doesn't matter how true your cut is at the end block end. It's always going to stay in the same place because you're rotating it. Let me put my mask on and we'll come right back here and cut this. Okay, I've got a mask on. You can probably still hear me a little bit. Okay, now we got power to the saw. If I can avoid kicking the camera stand, we can do this right. Of course, you need to be exceptionally careful when you're cutting this way. There is no guard. There is a little bit of knack to it, but after you've had an opportunity to do this on the scrap, you'll get pretty good at this. So here we go. Okay, now I actually left a little bit of kerf in that, and I'm not real sure why. A little bit of kerf right here. But if we can take that off. Now, you sort of got a bonus there because that actually was a mistake. We shouldn't have had to make that second pass. But in this case, we could, sacrifice, that was probably a 64th of an inch, 32nd at most, to get an absolutely square cut. If we go to measure this now, you'll actually see that we are still, I'll put this out on the end. We're still very close. In fact, we really are still at 12 inches at this point. In fact, it still may be a little bit longer than 12 inches. Obviously good enough for government work, as they say. There's one advantage to this. If you do sort of mess up and you don't get a real good cut, if you start out a little oversized, you can always take a second pass at it like we did and come back and trim that up. But in this point, save a little bit of sanding to remove the rough edge of this tube, and you want to be careful because right now it could, you catch it the wrong way, it could really cut you. You certainly could drive a small piece of fiberglass up in your finger. That would be difficult to even see without magnifying glasses. So we're going to sand this off a little bit. You'll notice that this other end actually is sanded pretty good. That's just a great example of how Mach 1 preps these tubes before they send them out to folks. And you'll often find that their kits are done in the same way. So we're ready to go on this, and we've got a nice 12-inch fiberglass tube.